the assumption is we should have our stuff together by now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're 40, we're, in our late 30s, 40s. I'm like one of the youngest out of my friend group and I'm 40. So I'm saying that to say like life is happening. You think you need to be at all of the events that your friends throw. You feel sad when you can't go to the wedding, when you can't go to the event because your money won't allow it. And so I think there's a lot of shame around just missing things at this point in our lives because of money. And I had to say to a friend recently, it's okay if you can't give a gift to this person right now, right? Wish them well, know that you're there for them, at a later time, maybe have a conversation with them about what your goals are. You don't have to go into the detail about the debt that you're in or anything like that. You just need to say, like, right now, I just couldn't prioritize this thing. And I think to your point, even around the conversations our parents didn't have with us, it's also conversations we haven't had with our friends, even the people that we've chosen to be our confidants. We don't even tell them sometimes that, hey, I'm swimming in debt right now. I can't actually go to your birthday party. Or, you know what I mean? Or I can come, but I can't give you a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes the gift, my presence is the present. And sometimes that is the reality. And I think the more honest we are with one another is the more I think people respect it, quite honestly.
Hey, 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 Savvy Squad. Welcome to another episode of the Dr. Sev Talks Money YouTube and podcast, where we empower women to manage money confidently. Behind every budget is a story, and often a little bit of shame. So, we're going to be talking about it today. We are discussing something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough: the emotions behind the budget. My guest is Khalya Hopkins, an educator, leader, and financial powerhouse who knows firsthand what it takes to climb out of debt and rebuild with confidence. Khalya, welcome to the Dr. Seb Talks Money podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seth, for creating the space. I appreciate you.
Okay, you are very welcome, and thank you for accepting the invite to join us. So, we know that money can be cause a little bit of tension. And so I like to kick off the podcast with a little bit of fun.
Okay.
And because I want you to be comfortable and I want the listeners to get comfortable after listening to this fun question.
Got
And
it.
I'll share my take too. If you were handed $50 to spend only on fun, what would you buy right now?
Only on fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my fun usually costs a little more than $50, but but I will say for $50, I'm an experienced person, so I think I would probably take the $50 and connect it to going like roller skating. One, it's economical, and two, it's something that I do want to get back into, is roller skating. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I don't know if this is fun, but I love to garden, so I'll probably stock up on seeds, or and I love to read. That's my two guilty pleasures is reading and gardening, and so I'll probably stock up on books and on seeds for my next garden.
So as you can see in the background, I love some books as well, but you said fun. So I was like, let me jump out of my comfort zone and go into something that I wouldn't normally say. I'm sure people would be like, she's lying. She'd have bought some books. But I do think, I do think I would go roller skating and just have a fun day out.
Yeah, yeah. As you can tell, my life is boring, so I couldn't think of anything fun outside of reading and gardening.
That's not boring. That's actually really helpful. It's relaxing and one will yield something in the end. So I think it's powerful to do so.
Yeah, my that's the reason I love my garden because when I go out there, I can think, it relaxes me. I unwind from all the stuff that's going on in the world.
Yes.
So that's what gardening means for me. Okay, so I want you to tell the listeners about you and the work you do.
So my regular degular schmegula, my 9 to 5 is I am work for a superintendent in the education system in New York City. I support 23 schools in my portfolio around special education instruction. And when I'm not doing that, I'm doing my second job where I am a graduate professor at 2 universities, and I train teachers who are either going into special education or getting an extension to their license in special education. So that's my job.
Yeah.
Um, Those are my two jobs, actually. But when it comes down to finances, that's something that now I'm starting to explore as a possible another stream of income.
Can you share a little bit about your journey with money and maybe how emotions first showed up in your financial decisions?
So money was something that was constantly spoken about, like around me, but wasn't necessarily spoken to in a productive way or in a positive way. It was always like, we don't have money for that. Or, if you ask for this, don't ask me for this later. So it wasn't really
Mhm.
like, I wouldn't say they were healthy conversations necessarily, but it did let me know that there was a lack of it growing up. And so my relationship to money was just like, why don't we have any? Like, where is the money? Like,
Mhm.
where's it going? Um, why is it that when I want a pair of sneakers or if I want particular things for school, because for little kids, back to school is like the it time where you get to show off and hopefully show off. But that wasn't my reality. And one of the things that I always remembered was my mom writing down bills on the back of like a random envelope. And I used to always be like, oh man, that just seems so random, right? Like to just be having these like little bills or numbers just all over the place. And I was just like, I know when I put my hands on money, I want it to not feel like something that is burdensome.
Mhm.
I always felt like money was something that I could never really attain. And that made me feel a little bit disheartened, right? I just felt like I was constantly going to be struggling, if you will. And so my whole thing with money in terms of an emotion was that I did not want to continuously associate it with struggle. And that's how I understood it for a lot of my childhood.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, especially people of color, we come from backgrounds where um, money was it was done, the thing was done, the home was paid for, or whatever, but we were never told it never we never they never discussed money with us. As you know, this is why we have what we have because we're saving or any of those kinds of discussions. But thankfully, we can pass that information on to our children because
Correct.
we've been socialized to, what money is and really how it works for us. Because you mentioned money is more than the numbers.
Yeah.
It's really much more than the numbers. In fact, the numbers are the last thing
Right.
about
Correct.
money.
Correct.
It's really the emotion. So you've been in debt twice, once in your
Right.
20s and again
Mhm.
in your 30s.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what was different the second time?
So I'm go backwards to go forward. So the
Mm-hmm.
first time that I was in debt was really, I mean, and again, Black women can kind of, I think, connect with this, right? You get in a relationship, you have these dreams, that both of you want to accomplish, and you talk to each other and you tell each other like, we're gonna do this together, we're gonna get an apartment, we're gonna, split the bills, or you have a plan in your head, and then the other person doesn't go along with the plan. So you end up having to cover, right? Because now your livelihood is on the line, right? Paying rent, paying bills, paying, at the time I was also in grad school. So I was paying for grad school on a payment plan. And by the time you know it, you're using your credit card to pay for necessities, right? Now you need groceries. You got to pay your Con Ed bill. You got to pay, for clothes, just basic things. And so next thing you know, you're in debt. I one good thing about me is that I always made a payment, right? I've never been delinquent on payments, but I had debt at like 22, 23 years old, around like maybe around like 10, $11,000, and I was only making at the time 50,000, right? So like more than 20% of my income was like debt related. So that was the first time. The second time I was in debt, it wasn't personal. It was for school. My daughter at the time was going to college, and we had to have a conversation about, I know I'm going to be in debt, right? Because I was so busy recouping in my 20s that I didn't have time to save money for college for my daughter. So this was like us moving from scratch. And just for context, I did have my daughter at 15, right? So there was a time where we were kind of just getting by a lot. So when we had the conversation, and I do think this is important to know, I had to explain to her, while you did get accepted to 11 out of the 13 colleges you applied to, this is what I can realistically do.
Yeah.
And this is how much I'm willing to go into debt, because I was going into debt regardless. But here's the amount of debt that I was willing to take on, and this is the plan that I'm making to make sure that by the time you're 28, that was my goal at the time, because she was going in at 18. I didn't want to have to be paying off her college more than 10 years. So it was a little bit different because the plan was only me that second time. The first time I got into debt, it was because I made a plan with another person and that person disappointed me. So, there is some disappointment and resentment. To go back to the emotional part, there was some disappointment and resentment that gets affiliated for me with money. But this time around, I really did stick to the plan. And while my daughter was in undergrad, halfway through, I had gone to get my doctorate. So I had to take on additional debt to pay for my doctoral program. So it was this money coming out all over the place. Like I was just borrowing and borrowing. So the second time was more for goals. And both times it was goal oriented, but the second time I went into debt, it was more for school. And the first time was more for just survival, I would say.
Yeah. I certainly understand the money flowing out of the holes everywhere. Okay.
Correct.
I certainly understand that.
Correct.
But the good thing for those who are listening to us, the good thing is there's always hope and there's always a way to rebuild if we're intentional. And my journey may take 5 years to rebuild. Yours may take 2. Other person may take 10. But just know that there's always a way to rebuild. And I think we alluded to this a little bit about money shame. What would you say money shame look like for some people in everyday life?
That's interesting. I was actually having a conversation with one of my friends about something like this. I didn't use necessarily the word shame, or maybe it did come up. But I think as you get older, right, the assumption is we should have our stuff together by now, right? We're 40, we're, in our late 30s, 40s. I'm like one of the youngest out of my friend group, and I'm 40. So I'm saying that to say life is happening. You think you need to be at all of the events that your friends throw. You feel sad when you can't go to the wedding, when you can't go to the event because your money won't allow it. And so I think there's a lot of shame around just missing things at this point in our lives because of money. And I had to say to a friend recently, it's okay if you can't give a gift to this person right now, right? Wish them well, know that you're there for them, at a later time, maybe have a conversation with them about what your goals are. You don't have to go into the detail about the debt that you're in or anything like that. You just need to say right now, I just couldn't prioritize this thing. And I think to your point, even around the conversations our parents didn't have with us, it's also conversations we haven't had with our friends, even the people that we've chosen to be our confidants. We don't even tell them sometimes that, hey, I'm swimming in debt right now. I can't actually go to your birthday party, or, you know what I mean? Or I can come, but I can't give you a gift. You know what I mean? And sometimes the gift, my presence is the present. And sometimes that is the reality. And I think the more honest we are with one another is the more I think people respect it, quite honestly, but also to understanding what your capacity is. Sometimes you just you'll find out people want to maybe hey, I'll spot you this time, or we just want to be with you. We want you to just come out for drinks and, we'll take care of it. And sometimes they can't do it either, but that doesn't mean that you can't schedule something else later on where you can still be with people and be in community with people without necessarily spending money. And I think the less we talk about the fact that we are struggling and is the less that we can actually enjoy our relationships.
You said so much there, so many powerful shares, because money shame can keep us silent. And when we're silent, we stay bound because we don't share what's going on. And you'd be surprised how many others are around you who are experiencing the same thing.
Correct.
So, and if they're really your friends, there is no reason to not share. And if you lose them, they were never your friends, because a lot of them may be fronting, as the kids say.
I would say that most people are.
Yeah, and so they think you have it, you think they have it, and so you're spending, they're spending, and you're all getting into debt for no reason, when maybe just opening up our mouths and saying, listen, I don't have it. When I was at work and I would tell people I'm not going out to eat, eventually they stopped asking me, and I'm like, I had a plan. I had a plan. And you're not going to come rescue me and pay my bills if I keep spending
Absolutely.
my money. So
Absolutely.
that's how I look at it. And of course, there are other people, they probably be not as bold and outspoken as me. So,
Right.
but find a way, as Dr. Khalya said, to share with your friends. It's about sharing with them, being vulnerable to say, listen, I would love to go, but I can only do XYZ. Or I
Correct.
can go, but I can't do this. Or I can hang out with you, but I'm only going to have a drink. I'm not going to
Right.
buy the meal, or
Correct.
whatever it is. Or let's have a potluck. I mean, there are
Yep.
just so many other ways that we can still socialize without having to spend a lot of money. So as you're listening to us, there's really no need to be ashamed. And if you're ashamed, if you're feeling shame, own it, deal
Mhm.
with it. But really, if you think about it, there's no reason to feel ashamed, because all of us came into this world without knowing how to manage money.
Correct.
And so the thing is to learn from it, share, find somebody who can support you, and then move forward. So in our discussion, I think before, we talked about money dysmorphia. Can you unpack a little bit what that means, and how it maybe show up in people's approach to money or their budgeting?
So I had this conversation several times, and I didn't use the words money dysmorphia, even though I do love the terminology. But I think that there's a way that you have to unpack your own money stories and
Mhm,
what people have told you about money.
mhm,
Particularly, we learn that first and foremost from our parents, whoever
mhm,
was, our caregivers and how they spoke about money. Like no one around me had any real money that, they weren't running around here just spending. That wasn't
mhm,
happening. But I had different versions of the same story. Like I knew I'm one of six, right? One of six children. So you're not getting a lot of things on Christmas, you're not getting a lot of things just in general because it was just more communal. Like we need to eat, we need to live somewhere, you have clothes, you'll be all right. But at the same time, I think that you might start to deprive yourself of things or overindulge. So you have these
mhm,
like two extremes that could happen as a result of what you've also been told. Like I know people will say, I couldn't have this growing up, so now I'm just buying everything.
mhm,
Right. And
mhm,
that's its own because it's dysmorphia because it's like not connected to your reality.
mhm,
Right. And so, like, if you don't have the money to buy all the things you want, and yet you're like, well, I have a credit card. I don't know how I'm gonna pay this credit card, but I'm gonna get it because no one got me those sneakers growing up, and no one got me those expensive fill in the blanks when I was growing up. You'll tell yourself that it's okay to spend the money when you really don't have it.
yeah,
Conversely, though, when you haven't gotten much, you may stay in that mindset of scarcity, right? And then you'll deprive yourself of a lot
mhm,
because you're scared you won't have the money, right? So it's like, and I think I fall more in the second category, right? I'm more like, we can't spend that because you don't know when we'll need that money for a rainy day. No, 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 we don't need to get that because you don't know, you know what I mean? So you have it does stay with you, like money anxiety, I guess I'll call it, because that's more close, I guess, to where I'm at in my mind. Um, is that you can look at your bank account, wake up and say, man, I do have the money to buy that bag, but I'm not buying that bag. And I always say the way you can always afford it is not to get it in the first place, right? So I can always afford it because I'm not
mhm.
buying it. So I think that's an interesting way to kind of be. I don't skip out on the things that I do value, right? I
Mhm,
like to travel. I like to save up to travel, right? I don't like to finance things if I can avoid them. Now that I'm completely debt free. So those types of things, it really is based on your value system more than anything else. But yeah, the stories you've been told, they follow you, and they
mhm.
follow you in sometimes a supportive way and sometimes in an antagonistic way. So I think it could go in either extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say values, because that was my next question. Many times values are reflected in our spending choices,
Absolutely.
whether we believe it or not. So how can someone begin to identify whether their spending aligns with their true values?
we always say like follow the money, right? The money will tell you, and now there's so many tools within like
Mhm.
your bank. They'll tell you, they'll actually give you like a pie chart. It'll break
Mhm.
down what you spend most of your money on. I don't think, like to your point about our values, our personal way of being is that much misaligned with our financial way of being, right? So I like to say that I'm a very disciplined person. And most people who know me would say the same, I think. And I was just on my phone and Google reminded me of a post that I saved from like 6 years ago from 2019. And it says, discipline is choosing what you want most over choosing what you want now.
Mhm.
And I had to think about like those things consistently. Like, what do I want the most? Not what do I want that is going to give me gratification in the moment, but what am I actually working towards? To your point, when you said, like, I can't go out with you because when things happen, you all aren't going to be putting around the collection plate. You might, but I can't guarantee that, right? I can't make decisions based on how it's going to make me feel for the next hour or day. Like, I'm trying to think about myself 20 years down the line. I'm trying to think about my children down the line. So I do feel like my values really are around being stable, making sure that my family is taken care of, making sure that I am taken care of, and just making sure that like I like I said, I consider myself a very disciplined person, and I consider myself someone of integrity. And one of the things, and this is not a popular opinion because, and I'm not trying to come for anybody's integrity, but integrity also includes that if you borrowed money from the bank, you are agreeing to pay the bank back. That's an agreement, right? I'm not trying to be all like high and mighty about it, but my word is my bond. If I say I'm going to borrow this money, my intent is to pay back the money I borrowed. Whether that's a friend, whether that's Chase, whether that's another financial institution, whether that's the student loans, I have every intent of paying people back that I owe. Even if it's an entity, right? Like an institution. So those types of things are where my values kind of come into play.
Okay. Yeah. Man, you're just talking my language.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad we spoke.
Yeah, I think you kind of maybe touch on this a little bit, because I personally believe that sacrificing should not be long term. It should be
No.
short term. And we touch on it a little bit. So how did you balance sacrifice with still living life as you were, digging yourself out of that?
So so there's two parts to that, right? Some is forced sacrifice and some of it is just personal sacrifice. So I remember the first time I was in debt back in my 20s. When you don't make a lot of money, you get a very good income tax return. So, that's a really happy time of year for some people, right? Getting your income tax and being like, oh, I just got back $6,000 or seven, whatever it is, right? Because I also had a daughter, so I had a dependent, and that helped me in terms of my return. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, who has transitioned almost 10 years ago, but I remember him having a conversation with me and saying, so what you gonna do with your income tax money? He wasn't asking me that because he wanted anything. He was just, we just talked about money. And I said, well, I'm probably getting back about 7,000. I'm gonna put 4,000 on my debt. And it was like appalling to him. Like, why are you gonna give them people all that money? And I'm like, "Look, I took that money from them people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I owe it. I owe it.
I owe them the money. So it was like absurd, right? That you would get this lump sum of money and that you wouldn't splurge or get something you wanted. And I was like, well, Dad, 3,000 is enough to get something that I also want, right? And so when I got my income tax, that was how I originally had climbed out of debt. It took me 3 years to get $10,000 out of debt. Because remember, I was only making about 50 grand a year and I had expenses. I had an apartment, I had my daughter. I mean, luckily, being in New York City, taking mass transit, I didn't have a vehicle. So that wasn't something I had to finance. But at the same time, you still got to pay for transportation. You still have to pay to eat, regular things. But I had to sacrifice my income tax 3 years in a row almost. Like, I mean, I was giving them high lump sums of money. And we still went, on vacation. And sometimes vacation wasn't luxurious. It was going to visit my grandmother and my aunt in North Carolina for 2 weeks, and getting just to relax, and have somebody take care of me and pamper me, because that's what they do down in the South. They feed you and they love on you. And for me, that was enough. at that time. And, we would resume and go on trips. Once I was out of debt, we went on a cruise. We went to Jamaica. We went to Mexico. We had a good time, but I knew that it was temporary. So those 3 years was just a 3-year plan to get myself back right. So the first time was not a big deal. The second sacrifice was a sacrifice for everybody that worked in my favor. It was the pandemic. The pandemic forced everybody to sit down. You couldn't go nowhere, couldn't really, people were definitely getting them Amazon packages. But I will say that because I wasn't forced to constantly be out and dressed and go somewhere and spend money outside, I saved a ton of money. And as a result of saving money, I was paying my loans back as I was taking my classes, as well as for my daughter. So while she was in school, I was paying those people back as she was in school. I did not defer. I did not wait until she graduated to start making payments. The minute they issued me a check, the following month they were getting payments. So that was the sacrifice, essentially.
Yeah. It's all about mindset, isn't it? Because so many people have debt, have obligations, and they get that money and they splurge. And then they're right back where they were before. And it's just a repeating cycle. And it's really about mindset. I don't want to be stressed every time about money. So what can I do with this lump sum that can get me to a place of peace?
Correct.
And I hope that somebody listening to us right now realize that they're just little ways. These are just little ways that you can use to get yourself out of debt.
Correct.
And it doesn't have to be something some big grand plan. It can be as small as getting a refund and saying, I'm taking a portion of that and applying it to my debt.
Yes.
Yeah. So looking back, if you could sit down with that 22-year-old self, in that first apartment, what money lesson would you pass along?
It's so funny. I feel like I've learned more from her, from the 22-year-old self. Like I always say, if something comes up, I'm like, I've been here before. 22-year-old Khalya got her out of debt. So I know that 40-year-old or 30-something-year-old Khalya can get herself out. So I've learned actually more from 22-year-old Khalya than I think 40-year-old Khalya would tell her, because I think like I had so much less then at that time, right? I was making less money. I was a single parent. Life circumstances also changed. And I think when you see an added person, like I'm with my husband now, and when you see an added income, right, it's very easy to say, well, we have more money in the household now. We can spend more money. And I was like, absolutely not, right? Like we are going to stick to what got us here, right? Like what got us here was still the discipline, right? What got us here was still looking at lump sums, because like, again, at the time I didn't have 2 jobs. Right. I didn't have the position I had back then. I only had a master's degree at that time. I was working towards my second master's at that time. And at this point, I have a doctorate. I have a second job. I have a better position. And even with that, I think what people tend to do is as they make more money, they spend more money.
Yes.
And my thing is to always try to keep the income way higher than the outgoing, the incoming and the outgoing, right? The incoming has to be way higher than what's going out. And that's something that I like to, I always try to make sure I have a surplus every time I get paid, right? I don't want to be like, oh, I just paid all the bills and I'm still in the red. I just paid all the bills and now I don't know how I can't even afford drinks now, right? Like I wanted to ensure, and I have continued to ensure that I don't continue to spend. So I guess I would tell my 22-year-old self, like, hey girl, when you get that money, right, stick to the same bills more or less that you had. Like we had to expand as my family grew. I only have 2 children, but I went from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. You know what I mean? Like we go up, but overall, that was also commensurate with my pay. You know what I mean? I wasn't just like every time I got a new job, I was just out like trying to buy a bigger house. You know what I mean? Necessarily. More like the family grew and therefore that was a need. But I've stuck to the script for the most part. So say, hey girl, you're gonna be proud of us in the future. That's what I think.
Yes, lifestyle creep is one of the things that get us. It gets us especially from those of us who come from a background of we had enough. I mean, we were good, but we could live a little bit better. So
Yeah.
now that we have that money, we're going to buy the new house. And in fact, I heard one time I was at church and somebody had just got a new house. And the pastor said, "Now you need a new car to go in the garage." And I'm like, "No, you don't. No, you don't." but that's our thought. That's how some of
Correct.
us think.
Correct.
And so that lifestyle creep gets that little money that we get instead of really thinking about how can I make sure I'm funding my dream and my vision by
Yeah.
setting aside some money. You're not guaranteed a job. You're
No,
not guaranteed good
no,
health. So
no.
having that cushion will give you some peace of mind. Doesn't mean it's going to take away everything, but it will give you some peace of mind having that cushion.
May I add
Not,
something really quickly? Because
mhm,
one of the things when you just said the thing about the church, in the comment, one of the things that I think is really difficult in terms of not wanting to make that sacrifice is because when you do upgrade your life slightly, right, you have different neighbors, and your neighbors now are talking to you in a way that can cause, if you don't have a very strong sense of self, you'll start to compare. And what happens is they'll start to say things like, "Oh, well, we just redid our deck. We just redid this, and we just bought it.
mhm.
I just got a 2025 car, right? I just went and bought." So,
Yes,
and now you're surrounded by that, right? You're surrounded. You move in a certain space, and now you're looking at your neighbors, and they're upgrading their home. They're buying newer vehicles. They're putting their children in extracurriculars that cost, and then you start to think like, "Am I doing enough?" And that's where you have to kind of quiet that noise, because it's not, to your point, in alignment with your goals, with your right, because my goals are still mine, right?
yeah,
I can't, but the problem I think is that people adopt other people's goals,
yes,
and that
yes,
becomes the metric by which they're measuring their own success. And I'm like, that can't, and that has everything to do with how your money ends up getting funny, so I
yes,
want to throw that
yeah.
out.
Yeah, I'm trying to teach my daughter the same thing. It's just because they're doing it and you have the money doesn't mean you need to spend your money. And so we're getting there. We're
Yeah.
getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's
Oh, yes. Well, before I ask about final thoughts, I'd like to know someone listening to us right now that's dealing with debt.
Mhm.
What's maybe one of the first small step that you can encourage them to take to regain control?
So I know we were talking about this offline, right? So a couple of my friends now have asked me to kind of look at their budgets and um, help them, because they've seen me get out of debt more than once, and be really disciplined, as I've said several times before. That word keeps coming up. But one of the things I've told, so I'm treating the listener as if it's one of my friends, right? So
Mhm.
one of the things that comes up when I look at the spreadsheet is that you can create really beautiful spreadsheets, and I'm realizing that the way people think about money is very different. And you're not really trying to crunch the numbers, because math is math, right? We can all sit
Mhm.
there and just add it up and see how, divide that by certain monthly payments, and this is how long it'll take you. It's not about just the monthly payments. It is about, why did you feel the need to spend this? What conversation did you fail to have when you spent that amount of money, right? One of the bigger issues that I've had with talking to friends was like the conversations they weren't willing to have with their children about what they could realistically afford when it came to college.
Mhm. Yeah.
I didn't have the opportunity. My parents wasn't even having that conversation with me. They were like, "Wherever you go, girl, Godspeed," right? Like, whatever financial aid package will send you is where you will go. And I think we're so busy trying to, quote unquote, break these generational curses, that we're perpetuating some curses, right? As
Mhm.
a result of not being honest about what we're doing. So when it comes down to just like a practical thing, I think the first thing you got to do is have a conversation with yourself about, like,
Yeah.
why was I spending this money? Do I feel good about the purchase that I made, 3 months ago, 3 days ago, today? Like, because some people, the shame also comes with regret, right? Dang, I
Yeah.
shouldn't have spent that money. I really didn't even need the X. Ah, man, I spend that much money at Starbucks. Like, people are kicking themselves as a result,
Yeah.
just not having an honest conversation. Like, I should have just walked by the coffee shop. and brought my thermos, as opposed to stopping in and buying a $7 or $6 large coffee, every day for like 3 months. So like
Yeah.
when you realize these things add up, it's the conversation you need to have with yourself. And I always say, celebrate the small wins. When I
Yes.
got into debt, one of the things they do when you're like 20 years old and 19 years old, everybody wants to give you a credit card, right? Everybody's just knocking down the door. They don't even care. You don't even have an income, really. They just giving you credit. And I had so many store cards when I was like 22. So I had like an Old Navy Gap card, a Victoria's Secret card, a Best Buy card, a Macy's card. Like I had all these cards. Now the limits weren't very high because they don't give you a high limit at 20 years old, but I was definitely using them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did immediately, because I knew my Visa card was the one that had the most, because it could be used anywhere, right? So that was the one that held the most debt. I started knocking those store cards out immediately. I was like, how much is the balance? $210. Okay, I can get $210 down within 3 months. How much is this Victoria's Secret? $140. I can knock down $140. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you got to start going with the small ones first, because once you start feeling like that sense of congratulations, you've paid off, even if it's small, that's one less person you got to think about now. That's
Yeah.
one less person sending you a bill. And so for me, I always say, like, start with your smallest win, because it's building back up that discipline, and it's building up a success story, right? Oh, I paid off 3 store cards. Now I got to go for
Yeah.
the big person, right? The big one. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was long
Yeah.
winded, but I think that was
No, that was perfect, because it is all the things that you mentioned. And for somebody else, it may be that they want to start off with the bigger one, whatever you're comfortable doing. For me, it's the smaller ones, because I'm like, yeah, I did
Yeah,
it. And it gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of celebration to move on to the next one. For
correct.
somebody else, it may be, well, let me start with the higher interest rate, because that interest rate is driving me crazy.
Correct.
Because the thing is peace of mind. What works for you, your personality, the way you look at money,
Correct.
what works for you, that's what you want to use, because that's the thing you'll stick with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
So,
agree.
and any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our visitors before we tell them how they can connect with you and what you have going on?
Um, I think one of my biggest thoughts is just like, we need to have conversations with our girlfriends in particular, because our girlfriends are our lifelines for many of us. I know they are for me. And I like to talk about money with my friends. I think we need to start having those conversations, and like, it's not just about, also like, there's some fleeting things that people do, like, oh, let's do a challenge where we save January 1st, everybody want to put $1 in the jar and then put $5 in the jar, and that by March, everybody stopped putting money in a jar. And so we don't want to just like start doing, and if that works for you, if that has worked, continue to do that. But I've noticed that once that New Year's, resolution time period wanes, everybody starts to just go back to their old habits. And I think it really is down to like, what's one thing that I can redirect, or I can stop doing as much. I tell people all the time, don't try to go cold turkey,
Yeah.
right? That's not sustainable. 9 times out of 10. It doesn't mean that some people haven't. It just means that on average, I have not seen people, they can sustain it for maybe 3-6 months, and then it goes all downhill from there. I would say more so, what is one thing you can cut down on? Not necessarily eliminate, but just to cut down on. Like, I love to eat out. That's my thing. And I allocate money for it to eat out.
Mhm.
But at the same time, if it really comes down to, oh, I'm not seeing the kind of money in my savings that I had anticipated, then I know I'm not just going to stop eating out. It's just not going to stop. But I do need to think about, if I ate out 8 times this month, that got to be cut in half.
Mhm.
So just being mindful of yourself. I think that's the thing too. We're so busy. We're in a very high paced, urgent kind of atmosphere, right? That it doesn't allow you to slow down and really take notice of what got you here. Because people say it all the time, I don't even know how it got to this point.
Yeah.
Like, but if you sit down, you do know how you got to this point, really.
Mhm.
So I think that's more of the conversations with yourself, with your friends, and also Can I say one really quick story though? Because I think this is super.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just telling Dr. Seb that I came back from Mexico yesterday, and of course you go to these. Sometimes they want to do a presentation for a timeshare. I have never been to one of these presentations in my whole 40 years of life, but I went to one, and I was like, "This is the grand hustle." Right? This is the grand hustle because I mean, and I went and I left with all my money in my wallet. I just want to start with the end in mind, right? Like I did not spend a dollar. I went for my free massages that I was promised after the presentation. However, I was like, they are using all the tactics. They are saying like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, 250,000 people are members. We help families just like yours. And oh, act now, or because some of these are going to go fast. They like to back you into a corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make you make a decision on the spot, creates a false sense of urgency. Like if you don't
Yes.
do it now, you'll never be able to do it. It's like, calm down. Like you're about to go down on this price, you know, about by 60% just to get me to walk out of here with something. So don't pretend like it's that urgent and it's that exclusive. It's not. So I just want like people to be mindful too that money is about being thought out, being planned. And of course, you can be spontaneous every now and then. Nobody's saying to just, be so rigid, but everybody's trying to sell you something.
Yes.
Everybody's trying to sell you something. And your values are going to determine what you decide, how you can be bought, quote unquote, and what you're willing to pay for.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, my final thought. I just want to get that out.
Yes. To your point, nobody wants to live. We don't want you to live a life of austerity. We don't, that's not what we want for you. We want to make sure that you enjoy your life. But at the same time, you have to think of what happens 5 years from now, what happens 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So bring that balance in and talk to your girlfriends, talk to your boyfriends, talk to your parents, talk to other people about money. Money's conversation should be like leaving the movies. And man, did you see that scene?
Yes.
That's how money conversations should be. I don't know why we're so afraid of it. Well, I do know why, but we shouldn't be afraid of having the money conversations and just making them commonplace and being a part of our lives, so that when you look back, you're like, well, I was afraid of that. Because if you look back, you've had some wins.
Right.
And I'm talking to the listener right now.
Correct.
You've had some wins. So what happened when you had that win?
Right.
How can you duplicate that right now? So I want everyone to be encouraged that
absolutely,
if Dr. Khalya did it, if I did it, if other people did it, you can too. And again, don't measure yourself by how long it took us and the methodologies that we use to get it. What works for you? What would work for you based on your situation? And go at it. Okay. All right. So tell us where we can connect with you and what you have going on. I think you have a podcast.
Yes, I do have a podcast called Black Women Be Knowing. And it's just all about me having conversations with other Black women who I respect about various topics, sometimes about money, not often about money, but like just in terms of like being educators, being moms, being women, celebrating ourselves is a lot of what I try to encourage us to do. And I'm on LinkedIn, which is how I found Dr. Seb, on LinkedIn in a group. So I'm on LinkedIn as Dr. Khalya Hopkins. And you can follow me on IG and like and subscribe to my podcast and all of that on Spotify. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I will have all of her information in the show notes on the podcast platforms and on YouTube. So, Dr. Khalya, thank you so much for joining the Dr. Seb Talks Money podcast and sharing your story and your insights on digging out of debt and money shame. And friends, if today's conversation resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with someone who could use a little encouragement on their own money journey. And as we wrap up, please remember to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, leave a review and a rating. If you listen on Spotify, leave a rating. And as you are completing your ratings, remember that we love the number 5. So until next time, this is Dr. Seb saying stay savvy, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.